Not only did I Love Lucy make people laugh when it initially appeared on American televisions in 1951, but it also gave rise to a whole language. Frenzied slapstick, red hair, black and white film, and a conversation rhythm that would influence sitcom pacing for generations. Beneath Lucille Ball's stunning overreactions, however, was another performance that was just as important and more difficult to live: Vivian Vance, the gifted stage actress who turned the cliché of the neighbor wife into a living, breathing human being. She was known to the world as Ethel Mertz, prickly, devoted, and hilariously frustrated. As Vance disclosed in subsequent decades, and particularly in her introspective interviews prior to her passing in 1979, the reality was that portraying Ethel necessitated striking a balance between love and annoyance toward the character, toward Hollywood's gender norms, and sometimes toward her adored, strong co-star. Born in Cherryvale, Kansas, in 1909 as Vivian Roberts Jones, she was raised with a voice that would not be contained. After participating in church choirs, she went on to repertory theater and, by her early 30s, Broadway. She has the desire of a dramatic actress, but the timing of a comedy. Critics in New York anticipated serious roles rather than the loose-fitting home clothes that Ethel would eventually animate. She encountered Desi Arnaz's production crew in 1951, where opportunity and desperation met. A foil, someone intelligent enough to fight with Lucy Ricardo but grounded enough to make her antics believable, was needed by CBS and the Arnazes as they developed a new kind of sitcom based on Lucy and Desi's actual marriage. Vance nearly declined the job. At 42, she was concerned that her credibility in theater may be diminished by a sitcom on television. Desi Arnaz had seen her stage work and thought she could stabilize the turmoil, but money was tight. Witnesses remembered that her audition consisted of a single line, uttered with exhausted laughter. "Fred." It was sufficient. No one could have predicted that the two women's chemistry would electrify and exhaust them for the rest of their lives, until Lucille Ball reportedly turned to Arnaz and exclaimed, "That's Ethel." Vance soon discovered on set that comedy success required almost ritualistic repetition. Every live studio episode was like a brief stage play that was filmed in front of an audience. The actors practiced all week, were filmed in order, and then performed under intense scrutiny. Ball, the show's fundamental perfectionist, required accuracy, a professional sensibility developed over years in radio and film. Vance, who had received training in theater improvisation, reacted naturally rather than rotely. On camera, their approaches collided nicely, but off camera, they occasionally caused bruises. Vance subsequently remarked that Lucy enjoyed practicing like a ballet. "I enjoyed practicing like a jazz musician." Eventually, they reached a compromise that created the rhythm of the show, spontaneity, and order. Nevertheless, the actress never really accepted Ethel's dowdy persona. Wardrobe designers aged her 10 years to highlight the contrast with glitzy Lucy, and makeup artists added fat that warped her naturally slender frame. She grinned in public, but chafed in private. She reportedly objected to Ethel's shapeless clothes during their initial fitting, according to an often recounted tale. According to reports, Lucille Ball supported Jenkins, stating that the visual difference was necessary for the humor. Costume designer Alois Jenkins recalled Vance objecting, saying, "But Ethel's supposed to be real, not ridiculous." Vance gave in, but years later, she acknowledged that the compromise hurt. Every actress wants to be funny, but none wants to be invisible. This was just one of many realities she shared in her latter years, recognizing that sometimes being brilliant means erasing oneself. That I Love Lucy's professional hierarchy made love more tense. Vance and William Frawley, Fred Mertz, were contract players, but Ball and Arnaz, who jointly owned Desilu Productions, had complete creative control. Frawley, who was 30 years older than Vance and had a notoriously sharp sense of humor, didn't get along with her right away. Off-screen, their marriage frequently wavered between sarcasm and quiet. On-screen, it appeared harsh but charming. She referred to him as an old poop, not always in jest, while he made fun of her age and vitality. The texture that audiences loved without realizing it was personal hostility reflected through humorous alchemy. When asked about Frawley in his later years, Vance would laugh and respond, "He was what he was," half of why the jokes landed. In contrast, Her relationship with Ball developed into true sisterhood as a result of their shared struggles with perfectionism. Ball defended Vance's comic genius, and Vance used empathy to soften Ball's harshness. Years later, Vance remarked, "Lucille was demanding, but she wanted excellence for all of us." They talked on everything from marriage to time, from craft to fatigue. Vance pushed Ball to embrace physical exaggeration while retaining heart at the center during filming job switching, and Lucy does a television commercial, 2 now famous episodes. They started to rely on the camera's unwavering impartiality, which transformed whatever off-screen truth between them into on-screen enchantment. That "I Love Lucy" summed up post-war home fantasy for the general public: a lovely wife, a patient husband, and a kind couple next door. The players had genuine human burdens behind the laughing. Vance battled chronic melancholy and self-doubt. Frawley controlled declining health. Ball faced sexism and concern over producing while parenting children, and Desi Arnaz battled alcoholism. She professionally concealed it before revealing it in interviews, stating that laughing served as a buffer and a cure. She once remarked, "Ethel always got the last laugh about real life, and that's what saved me. I wanted ladies at home to understand that it was possible to maintain your sanity in a hectic household." After 6 seasons and several reruns, I Love Lucy changed its name to the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour in 1957. Relationships deteriorated while the burden increased. Knowing that playing a secondary housewife for decades could cage her career, Vance was hesitant to sign on. However, devotion prevailed, and she returned for 3 more years, thereby witnessing Lucy and Desi's marriage fall apart. She subsequently thought, "We were all divorcing in different ways." The comment, which was half sardonic and half melancholy, encapsulated the mental exhaustion experienced by team players as they age into their own mythology. Vance persevered as the show's moral compass despite all the stress. As America's first on-screen confidant, Ethel Mertz provided humor based on truth rather than satire. She was not a subordinate to the millions of women who watched. Rather, she was an equal partner in mischief. The comedy best friend template would eventually be redefined by this nuance, much of which Vance improvised or argued into being. They were the direct ancestors of the Golden Girls, Laverne and Shirley, and the confidants that populated Friends. Even in her last years, Vance was acutely aware of this. She said to a reporter in the 1970s that Ethel changed television without anyone noticing. She demonstrated that you could be unassuming and still be strong. Her body of work had evolved from simple comic relief to cultural infrastructure by the time her career came to an end with her subsequent partnerships with Ball in The Lucky Show and Here's Lucy. Her secret revelation, which she just started to express publicly prior to her passing, was that no amount of celebrity could make that dichotomy any easier to understand. Thankfulness for teamwork, anguish at being invisible, and delight at friendship built on perfectionism. That a lady who had the audacity to make flaws heroic stood behind both legacy and humor. After I Love Lucy ended, Vivian Vance was left in that awkward limbo that all adored sidekicks eventually find themselves in: the audience's appreciation clashing with the industry's narrow vision. Casting directors couldn't imagine anything else, and viewers couldn't unsee Ethel Mertz. It was like being pinned behind glass for a performer who had grown up performing torch song leads and Shakespearean heroines. "She becomes your twin once the audience loves you as a character," Vance remarked to a friend. "She refuses to leave the house, even though you love her." Vance longed for variety, but the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour kept her in the spotlight until the late 1950s. She was reminded of what it was like to act without a laugh track by regional theater tours and the voice of the turtle on Broadway. Her instincts had been refined by the give and take with live audiences, and she thrived on the immediacy of stagecraft. However, touring also demonstrated how closely her public persona was linked to Lucille Ball's. Fans frequently called her Mrs. rather than Vivian Vance at the stage doors, Mertz. In order to reconcile her feelings of gratitude and self-respect, she learned to accept the attention with grace, perhaps with a hint of longing, and signed "Best Wishes, Vivian Vance, Ethel." Then, in the middle of the 1960s, loyalty and fate entwined again. Now separated from Desi Arnaz and operating Desilu Productions by herself, Lucille Ball was introducing a new sitcom called The Lucy Show. She desired her former partner. Vance paused. Years later, she said, "As much as I loved Lucy, I had to decide whether Ethel could survive in another neighborhood." She eventually joined, but this time it was under the name Vivian Bagley rather than Ethel. She was a single working lady who lived distant from Fred Mertz's apartment complex and had a child. She was able to update herself in the role while retaining the chemistry that viewers desired. Reviewers saw the change right away. The same sense of humor, but with a more liberated spirit. Vance subtly demanded that her character be single and self-sufficient. Women were evolving, and television ought to follow suit, she said. The Lucy Show was a comic disguise for social advancement, but on paper it was just the same old formula. Two pals mishandling misadventures. Even though it was uncommon in 1962, Vance's portrayal of a divorced mother on network TV demonstrated faith in the maturity of the audience. The collaboration thrived for 3 more seasons before Vance's Kansas Heart, and the strain of weekly production necessitated a slower pace. She requested to work part-time from the East Coast, close to John Dix, a literary agent and her third husband. After first refusing, Ball gave in with love, telling her, "Viv, I want you to be happy, even if it breaks my heart." Vance left in 1965, bringing an end to one of the most popular television couples. They just acknowledged fatigue masquerading as loyalty. They didn't engage in combat. The following years were peaceful but difficult. After being released from weekly tapings, Vance traveled the nation's dinner theaters, sometimes stealing scenes and supporting parts. She nurtured young performers and gave them self-belief and discipline coaching while directing amateur shows in Connecticut. She was kind yet strict, according to others who eventually met her. "She'd hug you after giving notes sharper than glass," one student remembered. Occasionally, television enticed her back with nostalgia-driven variety shows and cameo appearances on Here's Lucy. The two loosest bond grew outside of the film industry. Together, they took trips, talked on the phone late at night, and dealt with divorce and remarriage. Vance once claimed that she and Ball were bound by timing. "She'd set it up, I'd knock it down, in jokes and in life." Pictures of the two of them hand in arm are still found in portraits of Ball's Beverly Hills house. The laughing of those sessions did not appear in tabloids or screenplays. Vance's health started to deteriorate during the late 1970s. She was given a breast cancer diagnosis after experiencing uncomfortable symptoms for years, followed by metastases. After she and Dodds retreated to their Belvedere, California, home, friends observed a calmness that bordered on theatrical grace. She kept getting visits from other actresses, writers, and even loyal fans who sent her flowers, which she asked be sent to nearby hospitals. Her humor was unaffected by her deteriorating health. She continued to call her former partner. Later, Lucille Ball recalled going to see her in 1979 and said, "She looked beautiful, as always. You were the best partner a girl ever had," she told me. "We just held hands." Ball would go on to call that visit one of the most eerie gifts she had ever received. Vivian Vance passed away at the age of 70 in a few months. She had talked to biographers who were gathering I Love Lucy's history just before she passed away. She shared knowledge gleaned from years of working inside the Hollywood industry, not startling rumors. Her truth was poignant but practical. The first great female pair on television succeeded because two women trusted each other to shine alternately. Vance remarked, "Lucille had the drive, and I was allowed to laugh at it." She also addressed scars, artistic envy, imposed frumpiness, and numerous retakes, but never animosity. "Together, we made honesty humorous," she argued. "We fought for timing, not spotlight." By coincidence, their collaboration exemplified equality during a time when females were seen as competitors. One grounded her, the other played the dreamer. Lucy's pandemonium would have been empty without Ethel's practical kindness. The deeper revelation she provided, that beneath the flawless comedy was discipline ruthless enough to crush lesser spirits, was overlooked by the press, which was ravenous for scandalous information. Ball and Arnaz filmed with military accuracy. If a cue was missed, a complex camera setup had to be restored. Vivian Vance handled everything with professionally and a healthy dose of thankfulness. Unknown to the majority of actresses in her generation, I Love Lucy had earned her a household brand and guaranteed her financial stability. "I wouldn't trade a single laugh," was her straightforward response when asked if the fame was worth the stress. Subsequently discovered private letters added dimension to that viewpoint. Everyone asks for secrets. But the real secret is that we were terrified of failing each week, she said in a 1978 letter to a niece. It's a realization that exposes the fragility underlying vintage laughter. Two women discovering, week after week, that comedy relied on vulnerability masquerading as chaos. That anxiety kept the art honest. Vance understood that bravery better than anyone. She grinned when asked what she wanted people to remember during one of her final taped appearances on a talk show. That I worked with the best, loved them dearly, and didn't waste the laughter. The studio audience cheered, possibly unaware of the farewell ingrained in her words. She died with her sense of humor intact, telling friends later that evening, "I hope they see I wasn't Ethel all the way through. I was a woman who liked Ethel's hearts, not her dresses." Her tale now reads like the untold tale of television's heyday. Skill eclipsed by personality, intelligence concealed as comedic relief, an artist who discovered transcendence within constraints. The truth that Vivian Vance left behind is a philosophy rather than an exposé. Respect, the hidden rhythm of every double act, is more difficult to choreograph than laughing, and joy is serious work. Vivian Vance's death didn't mark the conclusion of the story. It permeated every sitcom that followed. Lucille Ball, who seldom discussed grief in public, acknowledged that losing Viv was like losing half of her rhythm. Ball maintained that beat by memory after 1979. For almost 30 years, they had operated by instinct, breathing in tandem across punchlines, frequently finishing each other's modifications before the director could call cut. She admitted to an interviewer, "I still wait for her laugh in the wings when I rehearse." Lucy Ricardo's crazy ambitions had once been grounded by the sound of her friends laughing, acting as a conscience. Ball created a tiny scholarship fund for budding stage actresses a few months after the funeral, with the stipulation that the beneficiaries must combine comedy with compassion. That sums up Vivian Vance's gift. She had combined warmth and wit, reflecting the ridiculousness of everyday life without ever making fun of it. Younger comedians started using Ethel Mertz as a model, someone who could be tired yet knowledgeable, angry but kind. The ancestry goes all the way back to the actress from Kansas who made self-deprecation the most dignified laugh in the room. No, Ethel, no, Dorothy Zbornak, no, Pam Beesly. Historians who study the early history of television frequently highlight how groundbreaking I Love Lucy was for women, but they hardly ever bring up the fact that Vance's acting was subtly feminist. She demonstrated solidarity by making fun of Lucy's disorder while shielding her from shame. The stereotype of the feminine straight man was redefined by that coded empathy. As she put it late in life, "Ethel may roll her eyes, but she never rolls them against Lucy." These quotes, which have been preserved in biographer Frank Kistel's research, express what Vance meant by truth. That comedy based on kindness lasts longer than sarcasm. She rolls them for the audience, so they know women see through nonsense and still love anyway. Lucille Ball upheld that ideal in all of her subsequent endeavors. Crew veterans observed that Ball would pause prior to Lucy's occasional mention of Ethel by name, seemingly respecting a silent cue. She praised Vance's professionalism in private talks with pupils at her acting seminars, saying, "No one protected me like Viv." Ball gave a Lifetime Achievement Award in 1986, dedicating it to all the Ethels in the world who make Lucis possible. This was the most public recognition of a creative debt that America had already understood but had never formally named. She gave me the courage to fail in front of millions. Television changed in the meantime. From home kitchens to city apartments, the quintessential female friendship remained true to its core, contrast and companionship blending into chemistry. According to academics who trace the origins of on-screen friendships, Vance was the first credible best friend, a performative blend of skill and sensitivity that audiences immediately trusted. In contrast to her predecessors, she was an anchor rather than a clown. She changed the power dynamics between characters and actresses by putting herself on the same humorous level as the star. Decades before the term ensemble casts was used in the industry, she had called for equal story weight. Later, Discussions regarding mental health in the entertainment industry were also influenced by her personal story. Following her passing, correspondence between Vance and fellow stage actor Tennessee Williams came to light. They were tender discussions on stress, fatigue, and the sustaining power of humor. They indicate an artist who is well conscious of the emotional toll that the entertainment industry takes. I learned from laughter that despair gets embarrassed and leaves the room, she wrote in 1977. This humane pragmatism inspired generations of comics that transformed suffering into grace, including Carol Burnett, Lily Tomlin, and Whoopi Goldberg, all of whom cited Vance and Ball as their compass points. That I Love Lucy repeats continued to be syndicated. But as women's studies scholarship grew in the 1990s, Vance's independence was rediscovered more quickly. The Ethel persona was reframed by writers as secret feminist iconography. She demonstrated body positivity decades before the term was coined. She negotiated friendship rather than obedience, and she gained household authority by competence. Vance was paired with giants like Lucille Ball, Eve Arden, and Donna Reed, equal partners, not sidekicks. By students studying gender and comedy, her desire to be plain and still powerful, a fact she expressed in private, finally gained societal recognition in that academic resuscitation. However, Lucille Ball's own legacy was the most poignant for fans around the world. Ball held back tears as he recalled their friendship in an interview on The Merv Griffin Show in 1980, saying, "Viv made the work mean more than laughter. We had total faith in one another, but that's not something you can fake." Her voice broke. The queen of television comedy may have run out of time just once. The incident showed how profoundly Vance's impact went beyond humor to the core of teamwork. Documentaries continue to use their collaboration as the benchmark for humorous chemistry even after several decades have passed. Every fleeting gaze between Lucy and Ethel conveyed not only timing, but also an emotional truth gleaned from their mutual vulnerability. How would Vivian Vance feel about her lasting importance? According to those close to her, she would laugh at the attention before avoiding it. She claimed in previous interviews that she had no gospel to preach except professionalism. But her actions belied that modesty. She supported local theater programs, pushed for improved working conditions for female crew members, and discreetly donated money to women's shelters long before celebrity philanthropy was in vogue. Her advocacy stemmed from the same passion that drove Ethel Mertz, the conviction. That compassion is revolutionary even when it is unseen. Today, visitors to her hometown of Cherryvale can see a modest plaque honoring the town's most well-known daughter outside the History Museum. One of her lesser-known lines from a 1977 radio interview is quoted, "Everyone loved Lucy, but Lucy's laughter came through Ethel. Maybe that's my job, to be how laughter travels," she said, encapsulating the entire narrative she had spent her entire life hinting at, the unseen conduit that allows others to experience joy. She saw the supporting part as crucial craftsmanship rather than something she regretted. That it contains the actual truth that she disclosed prior to her passing, not admissions of conflict or resentment, but the straightforward understanding that friendship sometimes entails stepping back from the spotlight to allow someone else to shine, and that artistry occasionally manifests as humility. That type of love, both humorous and real, was something Vivian Vance knew. Her life dispelled the myth that visibility equates to value, which is still prevalent in industry. The reverse was demonstrated by Ethel Mertz and the lady who gave her life. Invisibility can illuminate an entire era when it is chosen in love. Journalists played back that handshake at Vance's bedside in 1979, a quiet pact of love sealed by laughter, when Lucille Ball herself died 10 years later. Additionally, two women who had practiced timing to the last millisecond had timed their farewells flawlessly. The rhythm that underpinned contemporary comedy, setup, punchline, friendship, and truth, remained between them. Therefore, the light above the fictional apartment of the Ricardos at 623 East 68th Street continues to flicker in syndication, reminding viewers that somewhere behind Lucy's glitz, Ethel Mertz calmed the laughter with heart. The truth about Vivian Vance wasn't scandalous. That it was discipline wrapped in empathy, elegance under humor. A partnership manual that continues to be television's silent wonder. The world continues to laugh every time Lucy trips, and it discovers why each time Ethel pulls her back up. Vivian Vance's timeless admission that compassion is the most innovative joke of all time was, and still is.